action research project, ordinarily there are 6 steps to the project. The first is you have to identify a question. That's why I was asking what kind of questions come to your mind. You got to identify something that you want to try to explore to figure out what's going on. Second thing you do is what is called a literature review. How many of you have heard of a literature review, or that term? Okay, so a literature review, where'd you hear the term, Maria?
We had to do one last year for that video class.
Okay, great. And so can you explain what it is, Maria?
So kind of we had to do an anti-bibliography, which helps when you write it.
Yeah.
But so you do all your research and you find all your sources, and then what you kind of do is you kind of look at the ideas of all your sources and you try to find a way to group them together. So if you have, when I was doing mine, I was talking about manipulatives in a high school classroom, but I was also talking about how does the multiple representations help students learn. So I wrote, it's like you're writing a paper and you take all the ideas from all your different topics. And so I grouped it these are about manipulatives, and these are research done in a high school classroom, and then this is how students learn using manipulatives. So you group it that way and you write a big paper.
Good. So if you think back to Becca's example of should we do the lab first and then the teaching, or the teaching first and then the lab, if you wanted to do a research study on that, you're not the first person to have ever done it, right? Other people have researched that before. And what you're really interested in is how did they do it and what did they find out? Okay? So the heart of good research is starting off by asking what have other people done, what do we already know? That's really the heart and soul of the literature review. And Maria's right, you're going out there digging every possible source up that you can about anybody who's done a lab before instruction or vice versa, was taught indoor versus outdoor, or used manipulatives in high school. Whatever that topic happens to be, I want to know what everybody else that I can find has already done, so that I can say right up front, this is the question I'm interested in. Here's what everybody else has done so far, but this is what I'm going to do in my classroom. I'm going to collect data by doing this. And then you explain, or you think about how you're going to collect data, when are you going to collect it, how are you going to get that done. You actually go through the process of collecting and analyzing the data that you have. And then as we talked about earlier, you just describe a plan of action. Now that this data is together, and I've taken a look at it, and I've thought it through, what I would do next time is, now that I've done this whole study, I'm convinced more than ever that I really should be doing the labs first. And here's why, and you can explain what actions you can take. And then lastly, you try to share those findings with somebody else. A presentation, a paper, a poster presentation, an article published in a journal, a conference presentation, whatever it is, you try to share that with other people. So those are kind of the general 6 steps that are involved. So in our class here, in our 3160, what we've tried to do is make this kind of a 2-year process, so you're not kind of learning and thinking about everything all at once. We want to spread it out a little bit to get you to think about what action research is all about, and in your last year to get more deeply into actually writing the paper and doing the research. So what we're going to do in this course is we're going to talk mostly about these first 3 things. What are the problems you're most interested in? What do we already know? And how might you collect data if you were going to study that topic? Now, I changed the focus of this class last year, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So I'll explain it this way. What we used to do in the good old days, 2 years ago, was in 3160, we actually went through and did all 3 of those steps, and then fast forward to student teaching where we started collecting the data. What we found was that wasn't a very good idea, because after we did that a couple of times, here's action research in practice, right? You try it a couple of times, you see how it goes, you gather data, and what my students told me was they would get this really good idea for a research study they'd like to conduct in their school. And then they go out in the school on the first day in the fall semester in methods, and they discover that project they were interested in doing really doesn't fit this classroom. I was going to do a study of 7th graders in an urban setting, and I ended up in a 9th grade high school classroom or in a suburb or something. Or I really wanted to study this kind of a lab experience, and I found out that my school doesn't even have the facilities to pull that off, and I have to do this instead. So what we did is kind of changed the focus of 3160 to be a little bit more of a practice round, to get you to think about, here's a topic I'm really interested in, get you to research it and write a good strong literature review, and then talk about if you could do a study in the school about it, how would you go about doing that? And you just speak to that briefly, really within just a few paragraphs, and that's it. And then what happens is that's kind of an opportunity for us to look at how you define the problem and how well you can write a literature review and so forth, and give you practice at that. And then when you actually get into the methods experience a year from now, and you're placed in a school, you can meet with your cooperating mentor teacher, take a look at it with your advisor, and kind of decide what is going to be the best fit for this environment. You know, and if it turns out that what you did this year was a perfect fit for it, and you can just keep moving forward, you do that. And if not, you can chuck the whole thing out and start over. It's not a big deal. Do a different literature review, choose a different topic, and move on. Because sometimes people just change their minds. Or, you know, over the course of the year, you may just find that you find something more interesting, you know? Like something you're really passionate about today, you may not be passionate about doing research on a year from now. So you leave yourself open to that, okay? And actually, we have our first 4160 session with our method students next week, and that's exactly where we're going to start next week, is kind of what's their field placement look like, and how likely is it that you're going to do what you originally thought you might want to do. My guess is about half of them will probably continue on the same road, and half of them will change their minds. That's okay. All right, so any questions about that? Yes, Richard.
I have a question with like sort of asking the problem and figuring out what to explore. Do you think it'd be simpler to do kind of like an open-ended question so that when we do go into our methods to teaching next year that we have more like an open-ended question to explore more like depending on the classes that we go to or like where we go?
That's kind of a tough one because you want the question to be open enough that it gives you some flexibility, but you don't want it to be so broad that you really wouldn't be able to research it either. What we find is most action research is very pointed. You know, I mean, Kim's pointed question was journals versus tests. That's what I'll look at. Instead of having a thesis where she starts off saying, you know, I want to explore different methods of assessment. Now, there are so many different methods of assessment, I don't even know where I would go to try to do a literature review on them. So you have to be specific enough that it lends itself to be able to do research on what other people have already done in that area. And if that can be done with the topic being a little bit broader rather than narrower, that's okay. But I can tell you that a year from now, you're going to want to get your topic and your paper about as narrow as you can get it, because you're looking at this one thing. That's a good question. Anything else that you're thinking of? Okay. So, the 3160 experience then kind of looks like this. I made a little graphic for our PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is in our folder at Canvas. But we think of it this way, that your requirement here is to attend class sessions. We actually have one that doesn't come until January, the others are in the fall. And your regular meetings with your project advisor, which I'll talk about more in just a second. So we're talking today about kind of the nature of what is action research. We will later on talk about how research is conducted and kind of written up. The process of writing a good, strong literature review and what that includes, the selection of a topic, and different methodology we can use to be able to solve problems. And then, like I said, the human subjects issue. So we're going to kind of, that's sort of the first half of that whole issue about human subjects, or about conducting action research. The project advisor, key thing. Most of you, but not all of you, have a project advisor chosen. And but we told you didn't have to have one by today. You do need to have one identified by the next time we meet, which is the 23rd, right? So it's about 3 weeks from today. So some of you wanted some flexibility of getting into the fall semester and meeting a couple of new instructors. The project advisor is a really important person because that's the person who is going to walk with you through this year and next. And it's kind of a 2-year commitment on the faculty member's part to say, I'm going to help you with this project. And one of the things that is really essential is that you are consistently communicating with your project director or project advisor. And I mentioned that I know in the spring, I want to emphasize it again, there's actually a form, you know, that they fill out at the end of the semester saying that you have communicated regularly with them, you've worked with them, etc. It's essential to do that. What you don't want to do is go off as a lone ranger and sort of write your own paper, get it done, and then just hand it to your advisor and say, this is what I came up with. Actually, the opposite should be happening. You're sitting down with the advisor saying, here are some topics I'm considering, what do you think? And you're having dialogue with them throughout the whole process. In an ideal world, I would work individually with each one of you to develop these, and I would love to be able to do that, but I can't. There's not enough of me to go around. So what we can do is we can take those project advisors and say, if each one of you has an advisor, that's the person that's your go-to person that you work with. They can answer your questions, and they are the first person that you go to through this whole process to meet, discuss, think about what your topic is going to be, run drafts by them. You know, I've written a rough draft this and give me feedback and tell me if I'm on the right track, does this look good, you know. All of that goes through your faculty advisor. And so at the end of our course, they actually then fill out a form that tells how well you've communicated, if you've kept appointments, if you've been professional, if you've kept them in the loop throughout the whole process, and are really using them for what they're being asked to do. They're a pivotal part of this. Your faculty advisors are being paid to be faculty advisors. Okay, the university pays for them. They don't get paid a lot, but it's, so it's more of a thank you. But they are paid some, and so that is our way as a program of saying that their work is very important. Not that it wouldn't be if they weren't being paid, but the fact is they are expecting to do work with you and for you to ask questions and to work with them along the way. So, syllabus, if you've got with you either the paper copy or you have access to Canvas and want to pull it up, I have just a few things I want to spotlight again. We talked a little bit in the spring, but I'm not sure we're on the same page here. Alright, so first thing is, we will be using for the course a textbook called A Short Guide to Action Research, 4th edition. They are on your tables right now, and there are copies for you. Those are yours to keep, so you can put your name in them. We purchased them with Choose Ohio First dollars. Isn't that cool to take a class where the textbook is provided?
It's so weird.
You just have to love it. It's so weird. It is.
Sorry, crying out.
Really unusual. Yeah. It's like Christmas morning or something. You will read that book throughout this class and 4160. My students in the first couple of cohorts have told me that they really like that book a lot. That's why we've stuck with it. It was an original book that we selected, and I haven't changed it because it's gotten such good reviews. I think it's very practical. The author of the book writes it to you. Very practical, real-life stories. Here's one of the things that I saw students do. Here's an idea you might want to think about, kind of thing. So it's very practical. We will also, as needed, there are websites that the APA has for using proper, we're going to be writing everything using APA style. So there are websites about using APA. We also have a manual in here on the bookshelves that you can borrow. And you might want to use that too. But we'll learn to write using that style. APA is used for all education research. Okay, going back to our learning outcomes for the class, to gain knowledge about and the purpose of action research, to develop an appropriate research question, to think about, to analyze and synthesize research on the topic. That's your kind of your literature review. To think about the methodology you might use, and to create a written paper that includes those things. Okay, and here's the standards of the profession. So, as we talked about in the spring, there are three major pieces that are assessments that determine your grade. You think of this as a 1-hour course. You won't actually be registered for the course until spring semester. Okay, we basically do our class sessions this fall. You do the writing after the first of the year, turn it in by midway through the semester, and then, you actually register for the class for 1 hour in the spring semester. Okay. So participation is required in all of our sessions. We have 5 of them this fall, and then the one we'll do in January later, a date to be announced during the common time. I mentioned earlier your project advisor checklist. That checklist is actually available at Canvas. You can take a look at it again, but your advisor turns it into us by April the 1st to let us know how well you communicated with them throughout the project. And then you have a written paper. Your paper is due March 4th. Okay? We set the due date for the paper earlier rather than later, so it's off of your desk before we even get to spring break. And it's the type of thing that once we have got all the pieces together, you can start to write that paper sooner rather than later, get it done and have it finished before March, so you're not dealing with it all this semester. So you turn the paper in by March 4th. It has these kind of required sections we'll talk more about later.